Episode 24, Clean Content Creation with Rhodes Gibson, Sports Boy of Sports Cards Nonsense, Part 1. Welcome to the 24th episode of the Card Diary by Hobbyist Thompson. I am your host, Denny Cards, and thank you for tuning in. So, just to give you a little behind the scenes BTS or behind the curtain view, because I personally like it when other podcasters or content creators do things like that, where they show kind of how a glimpse of how things are made. This is the first time that I am not going to go chronological in the order that I had my guests on, and it's for a very good reason. Okay, so here we go. Right after having Blake Grice from the Blake Down on, I had the great pleasure of having as my next guest Courtney Reckless from Reckless Cards. And we talked about content creation, the social media empire that she and her husband Jeremy have made across all platforms, including podcasts. So check out their podcasts, Too Thick Pod, Dangerous Games, and Hobby Night School, the latter of which I was fortunate enough to be on, asked on earlier this year. So, but the thing is, when we recorded last week, we also talked about women in the hobby, and it was a really good discussion, but it is not an easy, light, breezy listen. And so, because I just had Blake on, where like I'm fighting back tears, we're talking about kids in the hobby. It was actually Courtney's idea, my guest. After we recorded, we were talking about when I would run it, and I guess now she's the executive producer of this show. But it was her suggestion to have a guest in between. And I thought about it and I agreed. It was a really good idea. And so I wanted to have on someone who I thought could be a lot of fun, bring great energy, and have a good light back and forth banter with. And really, I couldn't think of anyone better than Jesse from Sports Cards Nonsense. It's a podcast, I jokingly keep saying, powered by the Ringer Network and Spotify. He just has such a great chemistry with his, podcast co-host Mike Gioseffi. I think the two of them have just a really, great podcast, one of the biggest ones in the hobby. And even though I've never met him or either of them in person, and I have not had a one-on-one conversation with him other than in Instagram DMs, I really thought that Jesse's podcast mic skills are so good and he just seems so relatable that, I gave it a shot. I just reached out. He said yes. And he was just so generous with his time. And he was such a pleasure to do this episode with. And I just think he did a bang up job. And so I'm just really grateful for him. And so I think I'm going to keep this intro short. And I'm going to try something at the end where I'm going to try an outro. So thanks. Hope you enjoy the first part of my chat with Jesse Rhodes Gibson, Sports Boy of Sports Cards Nonsense. That is such a mouthful. All right. I think I started. Okay, welcome to a new podcast series called TCG Cards Nonsense. I am your host, Denny TCG Cards. I'm kidding. Jesse, before we get to your intro, do you think that calling it TCG Cards is redundant because you're kind of saying like trading card game cards?
Oh, I think about that constantly. I also think about calling it TCG Games, which that's also, yeah. To say that I don't constantly overthink every word that comes out of my mouth would be a lie. As someone who their job is to speak for a living about different topics, you can't help it. And someone who now yourself is doing a podcast, you are going to be infected by the bug of, did I say that right or wrong? I typically err on the side of, you know what? It's said, let's just keep going. Let the flow happen.
Exactly. I constantly overthink everything in my life. I will say that. I think people who have listened to this podcast so far understand that. The reason I bring it up is, one, we're here to talk about TCG cards, and I'm so glad to have you. And I will do a proper intro, but I don't know if you've seen that movie, Spider-Man Across the Multiverse. Have you seen it yet?
Not the new one, no, sadly.
Okay. this is not a spoiler, but I did make
Okay.
an episode earlier about how, the National is going to be like the hobby multiverse and we're all going to meet together. But there's this one scene in the beginning where Miles Morales, he just says like, why do people say ATM machine? It's the machine is in the M, right? So,
you
uh,
know, I it's not a spoiler. Did you just ruin a very great joke in that movie? Yes, you absolutely did, Denny. But I'm going to let it slide. It's okay.
yeah,
We're
we
going to
just
move
move
past
on.
that.
I do not,
Exactly.
yeah, I do not edit this podcast one bit.
Good. Good.
And we can talk about, when you do the podcast creation, whether you do editing. But
Sure.
I did want to have you here to talk about content creation, but also give you the platform and the space to talk about TCG cards because Denny Cards does not discriminate. And yes, I did talk about myself in third person just now. It's not just sports cards. Like I love TCG cards. I remember owning Magic the Gathering cards as a kid. So I'm so glad to have you here and thank you. And I know we have a hard stop. So this may be our quickest interview and I'm here for it. So could I can I do my intro now?
You do whatever you please, Denny. I love just listening. So keep going. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, because what I realize is when I do these podcasts, I have this monologue intro and I kind of like I don't need like a nice standard intro. That's what I've realized. So anyway, I'll learn how to become a better podcaster. But here we go. My very special guest for today's episode is no one other than Jesse Rhodes Gibson, the better half of the duo that has the largest hobby podcast called Sports Card Nonsense, powered by The Ringer and Spotify. We must always,
Pay homage to the king. Yes, Mr. Bill
cor-
Simmons. Thank you.
corp. I met him. We'll talk about that later because I'm already ruining my own intro here. He is a native of Hendersonville, Tennessee. And that's, of course, why for the people who are listening to this, I had to wear my blue and orange Florida Gators hat for today's conversation. Go Gators.
Sure. Hey, you know what? Again, this is your world. I'm just living in it, baby.
Yeah.
Whatever you say goes, okay? Until we're off air. Yeah.
Yes. Until we're off air. And then it's back to Jesse's world.
Exactly.
Jesse's claim to fame before being in the hobby and having a podcast was that he went to high school with Taylor Swift and he beat her in a battle of the bands competition.
Yeah, you could say that it was high school talent show senior year. I don't like to brag about what makes a great talent. Some people would say you could tell it's a great talent if they've made billions of dollars going on multi-continent world tours. Yeah, that's one way to say it. Others say it's the person who's on a sports card podcast who really knows very little about sports. That would be the real talent, in my opinion, because not many people can do something like that. So, yeah, no big deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely, no big deal. I mean, like the Supreme Court has said, you know it when you see it, right? I mean, you just
exactly.
Yeah,
that's where talent lies. Yep,
exactly.
In the eye of the beholder.
So yes, I love that you're just interweaving into the intro. So the final sentence I'll say for your intro is there is no one like him. He is the one and only Jesse Rhodes Gibson. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Dude, that was an incredible intro. I apologize for interrupting so many times, but it's just like it lends itself to so many natural discussion points that I hate to let anything just fall on the floor. But that's my fault. I'm too used to running stuff on our show. I need to be a better participant and not a leader of the show. And I'm gonna do much better the next 45 minutes.
No, you will not.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I won't.
Yes. One thing I want to say is I really am trying to cater these to be more like discussions and chats. And so I don't want it to be like an interview. I think you and Mike are great interviewers and also conversationalists. And you guys have an amazing chemistry that I want to get into as well. But when it comes to this, let's interject, let's talk, let's just have a nice free-flowing conversation. Is that what Bill Simmons used to say early in his podcast? And by the way, all of this is like conversational threading. Whenever you give details, it just leads you down these rabbit holes. But I'll just do a quick 1 minute thing about Bill Simmons. I know that he is your employer and your boss, but I met him at the 2012 National in Baltimore. He was cutting content and he had a camera crew around him and there was like no one around him. And I just went up to him and was like, hey, why is no one how are you just walking around and no one's bothering you? And I, of course, now in my older age, I realize I'm the one bothering him. But I will say he completely blew me off. He was like, I'm busy. This is my Bill Simmons. Hey, I'm busy. Hey, Denny. Hey, Denny, I'm busy. Can you
That's a
I'll
nailing
come
it.
see you. I'll come find you. Okay, all right. So I didn't even
Okay.
get I didn't even get a selfie with him. Not that I'm sore about that at all, but I did go to his book signing. I for Book of Basketball when it came out. He came to DC back when we had an ESPN zone, and I
Okay.
went to that book signing and I got my book autographed. I gave him a Kevin Garnett card
Oh,
that
cool.
he immediately just ripped in front of me because that's it. That's who he is. Just what this is all just water under the troll
Did
bridge
he
here.
really rip it in front of you? Did that happen?
No, well, the memory, the brain is a wonderful, special thing. We remember what
Hmm.
we want to remember, right?
That's
So,
true. It is hard to tell. Yeah, what is a planted memory and what's not? You choose to believe what really happened and what didn't happen sometimes. I like to think of Bill as our boss, who I've never spoken to in a one-on-one situation,
hmm,
but still constantly listens to me in the back. Like I like to think in my head, and this is again maybe one of those fake memories, but I like to think he's in his den. He's got like all the lights off and he's just listening to sports cards nonsense. And every time Mike speaks, he's fast forwarding until I speak again.
mm-hmm.
That's basically my imagination of what Bill does on a day-to-day basis. I'm sorry to hear that he rushed you off in 2012. I'd like to think that a decade has passed and he probably wouldn't do that at this point. So
Yeah, no, I'm sure he thinks about it every day. But let me just do a quick performance review with Jesse, and none of this is planned because I didn't think we were going to be talking about Bill Simmons. But here we go.
okay, do it.
Hey, Jesse, I think you're doing a great job. Just keep up the numbers, the sponsorships. I really appreciate it. If I can consign with you, you just let me know.
Hey, Bill, absolutely, man. Yeah, whatever you need. You need consignment. You need grading. You need
Oh, sorry,
whatever.
I got a phone call. I gotta go. I
Oh,
can't.
Bill, no,
I
no, no.
don't.
I thank you though for the time. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. It
yeah,
was good to talk
yeah,
to you.
yeah, yeah. My phone's ringing. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, bye, bye, Bill.
Bye. All right. Thank you. We're done. End
Wow,
scene. End
it
scene.
was
This
really
is
cathartic.
talent. Yes, this is
It was.
cathartic.
Were you in
Um,
like were you in theater or like anything like that in school?
I had the worst debate team experience in the world, which I will not divulge in this current podcast. I mean, I appreciate you asking
Really?
because, again, this is a conversational thing, but I think a lot of the people who wanted to do theater who couldn't went into debate team. And
Okay.
that was their way of scratching that creative itch. I have no creative bone in my body. I have like literally, I mean, I will say it like this. I love creating content in the hobby because it allows me to show and express my creative side. But when it comes to everything outside of the hobby, I am an incredibly not dull, like I'm, but yeah, I'm an incredibly dull person outside of the hobby. How about that?
I can appreciate. Hey, you know what? Sometimes you're on, and that's fine, and sometimes you want to be off, and that's fine too. I'm very similar. There are times where there's no cameras around, and I want to be the center of attention. But then there's times where it's like you would think I'm the most inward, not outgoing person that you know, because I like to have my solitude, and I don't want to hang out with anyone, and I just want to be in a dark room. There. I think humanity is a complex thing. And how
Mm-hmm.
are we talking about this? We are 10 minutes in and we haven't talked about anything of substance. And I love it. Like, if anyone loves a good conversation, the banter is one of the things that draws a lot of people to our podcast. It's just a good, weird, fun conversation. And that's what this is, Denny. You're killing it.
That's the nonsense in sports cards nonsense. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for saying that. But we are going to get to TCG. We're going to get to content. But having said that, again, I just go down every rabbit hole, every conversational thread. Clearly, I'm listening, right? I mean, people who are
absolutely.
really good interviewers, they just kind of like have really good questions, but it's just not a flow. But yeah, when it comes to your podcast, can you just share with us just how it all started? Because I know because I've listened, but just for folks who may not be familiar with the podcast or its origin story, can you kind of share everything since you beat Taylor Swift in high school to where we are today?
Yeah. Let me give a quick update. So the year was 2004, April. No, I'm not going to go that far. So basically, long story short, the other half of our sports cards nonsense duo is Mike Giuseppe. Mike is a very big sport and sport card guy, and he got into this world early mid 2010s, back into it, I should say. He collected a lot as a kid, and now he started breaking for a long time, and then in 2019 to 2020, he decided he was going to sell the breaking company. And once he sold it, he was just like, you know what? I still enjoy cards. I still want to do something in cards. Maybe I'll start a podcast. And I had during this time, and by the way, I should preface, Mike is my cousin. I guess you could say cousin-in-law. Like, he married my cousin. So we were close for, years before this. We were hanging out. We were best friends, just, not doing anything podcast related. But he talked about wanting to do a podcast, and I was like, well, I mean, I could help you like put that out there. And so he started doing one because when he was breaking, he was on Facebook all the time and just would go live. And sometimes guys just wanted to hear him talk about cards, not even though he wasn't breaking anything. They just wanted to hear him talk about what he thought about the hobby and other things like that. So he's like, well, people want to hear my voice. We'll do a podcast and just do some, random talking points here and there. That spun into, okay, well, I'll put it on YouTube, and you get another guy. So he got another buddy of his, and it's actually now a guy who's big with Monster Breaks. So they started doing this podcast, and they called it Midget and the Ogre, which they quickly, well, not quickly, I helped them to realize that's not necessarily appropriate. We're going to change that name, and we're going to do like Geo and the Ogre. So then it became Geo and the Ogre. Well, then after like the first few episodes, it just timing wasn't working out for when this, like, how to make this thing more consistent. And so I stepped in one day. I was like, you know what? I'll just be kind of like a side guy, helping out, making sure the conversation flows, things are moving forward, and you've got someone to talk to at least. And then we started putting it on TikTok, and that was kind of all she wrote. As far as once it got onto TikTok, one of the other podcasters for The Ringer, someone who works with Bill Simmons, Chris Vernon, he, in his, I guess actually one of his kids, was like scrolling through TikTok and heard Mike in one of our clips yelling about donkeys and whatnot. So he was like, what are you watching, kid? And he started looking at it, and he was like, oh, he kind of enjoyed the content. He passed it over to Bill. And again, this is like end of 2020, right in the middle of the card boom. And Bill, this is at the time when Bill's still really into the card boom and the card market, and passes it along. And next thing we know, we're getting reached out to him after only posting stuff for a few months online. And he offered us a contract to do The Ringer professionally. So, or the podcast professionally. So yeah. And now we've been doing it since January 2021. That's it. I'm sorry. I mean, I can keep going, but that was it.
I'm trying to do my Mike. I'm trying to get into the voice of Mike, and I can't. I can't do Chris.
It's hard to do a Boston accent too. It's not as easy. Yeah.
Hey, that was a really good job, Jesse. That was a really good job.
Good intro. Didn't say sausage fingers or anything like that. You should have said like anything like sarcastically
no
nice.
Shaming. No shaming. You see, here's the thing. I feel like I know you because I see your content. That's what people say about me too. I don't know you. I mean, we haven't met in person. I look forward to meeting you in the National in about a week. But
yeah, absolutely.
When it comes to your chemistry with Mike, it's really the two of you. So, I mean, I can make jokes, but I won't make jokes about either of you other than just saying you're the, when it comes to the Beauty and the Beast analogy, you're the beauty, he's the beast. But no, I mean, I have nothing but good things to say. I love your content. It's so witty. It's so sharp. It's so funny. What was I going to say? Yeah, you said cousin-in-law. That's great that he's your cousin-in-law. I mean, look, I'm not from Tennessee and West Virginia. I have no clue how y'all do cousin stuff there, but that's great.
He married my cousin. That's not a weird thing. Okay, I have to preface.
How many cousins apart? What are we talking here? First, second, third?
This
I don't
is
know.
first cousin, my dad's daughter, my dad's brother's daughter.
Your
Okay.
dad's daughter's brother.
No,
No, isn't that
no.
you? Wait, no, wait. Oh, hold on.
It
Your
doesn't
dad.
matter.
Okay.
It's all legal. We'll just say that.
It's all
Okay.
legal. Yes. In the laws in the state of Tennessee and
Tennessee, it's all legal, but
yes,
what's
it's
not
all legal.
really?
Okay. So, y'all really run again. Like I like your podcast. You keep it really clean. I think one of the first interactions I had with you was when I DM'd you saying one of your guests cursed. And it was just like one word. It was like a one off. It was real quick, and then you guys like immediately jumped on it and like you scrubbed it.
Dude, here's the thing. I appreciate you saying something too, because we really do pride ourselves in multifacets of our life, not just on the podcast, but being family friendly. Like we, and granted, sometimes Mike gets a little agitated and things get worked up, but at the same time, he has actually also worked on that. You'll notice, like, compared to excuse me, some of the beginning episodes, it's not quite as intense as it once was, and that's purposeful. We want to be able to, you know you can listen to this in front of your kids or in front of your whoever it is that would be sensitive, have sensitive ears. And we think that you don't have to do, some guys need to go to the extremes to make content edgy and fun. I feel like we can do that without being inappropriate. So that's what we strive to do. Thank you for noticing.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's my content as well, because even though I look at my analytics and I see that there's no one under the age of 23 listening to the podcast, um, I
Yeah.
just feel like who knows, kids could be in the back seat right now listening to you and I banter, and kids will be eventually exposed to those to that type of language. But I just feel like just let's keep them as young and innocent as possible until the real world really hits, aka perhaps middle school or high school.
Yeah, I agree. Like I know that my daughter's like, we've, my wife and I have watched enough just YouTube, and just someone just slips in a random, something here or there. She
Hmm.
knows all of the words, but she also knows, like, if she were to ever hear, my wife or I say something, she'd be absolutely shocked. And
Hmm.
and we like that. We like the fact that we can keep it not only just like the cursing, but just subject matter too. We don't
Yeah.
want to go too extreme on any specific subject. And there's stories that maybe more edgy, or might get us a few more clicks, but we'll purposely steer away just because we know, we want to keep things as PG to PG-13 on the most edgiest of
Hmm.
cases. So
The Spider-Man movies, the cartoons. No, I love what you're saying because again, I have you here as an expert of content creation, and you guys have an awesome. So I would love to do a chapter episode about podcasters or podcasting, but right now it's about content creation. I
Oh, to
am.
that point though, to podcasting and like content creation, like
Mm-hmm,
you'll notice that even like some of the guys in content, I've noticed, like, I'll occasionally watch a sports card radio clip or something, and you'll notice like even some of theirs has gotten a little bit more mild and tamed, but
mm-hmm,
a lot of like YouTube won't, like, sponsorships and stuff, they won't put as much money behind a video if there is like a ton of cussing or something like that. Even like
mm-hmm,
really big, you'll notice like really big YouTubers and stuff, like it's purposely toned down over the last couple years or something. And there was a time, there was like a transition period where you can kind of tell when some of these law or rules took place in that content creation, because they were even mentioning in some videos that, because I consume a decent amount of content, and a lot of it does come from YouTube video creation. And there was a lot of different creators at the same time saying, oh, I can't cuss, or they started bleeping it because they knew they would either get demonetized to a degree. I don't think it would take all of it away, but they wouldn't make as much as a video that was more PG to PG-13. So while it does behoove us to make content like that can be listened to at all ages, it also there's a dual-edged sword there that we, for reasons why we do it that way.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned them, so you opened the door. So I'll just kind of briefly say Sports Card Radio. I actually do like their I think it's entertaining. Do I
Mhm.
agree with everything they say? No, absolutely not. But please don't come after me and please don't put me in any of your videos.
That's always
This
the
is not
fear, right? Like
yeah,
no one's confident about saying anything about them because they don't want to be attacked
no,
because they're like, oh, I'm probably not going to attack them back, and
no.
I don't want to like have to defend myself at a future date. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no. If the twins and I were in a octagon ring, I will immediately submit to anything they do, and
sure,
please, let me leave the ring with my integrity intact or
yeah,
something like that.
absolutely,
But this it's really interesting. Again, positive forward content I think is what again it's really interesting because I have heard you and especially Mike kind of go after some of the bad actors in the hobby. You even have some of the bad actors in your hobby. Like I remember the Retail King thing. You had the guy on, which I was amazed, and I think I DM'd you saying that was an amazing interview with
mm-hmm.
the guy, and I really appreciate it. And kudos to him for coming on. But what does Mike usually say? He's and I won't do the voice, or maybe I will. I don't know. But it's like, hey, we'll have anyone on. You just come on and you want to talk, let's talk.
Yeah,
That type of thing.
that's
So,
pretty it. Yep.
what do you? So my question, I guess, is when it comes to creating content, you are like this whole. It's almost like an East Coast West Coast rap battle: hobby positivity, hobby negativity. Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. So, do I think that the hobby should be more positive? Absolutely. Like I wish in general the a lot of the content I see out there would steer more positive. And I'm not saying that because I want all content to be positive. I'm saying that because I feel like it's oversaturated with negative content.
Mm,
Like it just seems like there's more negativity than there is positivity overall. And maybe I also know too that in the position I'm in, I see a lot of content that is maybe geared more towards the things that we'll end up talking about, which oftentimes is the more negative stuff, which I know I'm not doing anything to help by promoting a negative story sometimes. But that's why we really do our best to try and, even though there's like a negative take on a story or there's something that happened that, oh, we should talk about this or that. Sometimes we just won't. And it's not in an effort to hide or cover up anything. It's just more of an effort. Like if I'm a listener, like I try and put myself in the listener's shoes. I don't want to listen to that all the time. Like, and there are guys who would like to listen to it all the time, and for that they can go somewhere else, or they can listen to us just when we do a blast of somebody. I think for the most part, though, our listeners are appreciative of the times where we'll break a story, but also they really appreciate when we're just talking about collecting or cards in general, or just bantering back and forth. Like, and so yeah, my whole take is with Mike and I, he typically will take, I don't want to say he'll take a negative stance because he overall in general in life he is a very nice person and a good guy.
mm.
But on the podcast, I think it's a little bit easier for him to see the dark side and a little bit easier for me to see the light side. And honestly, I think that's what makes a podcast good. I think it makes any content good, is opposing opinions and sides of stories. And we've kind of talked about that on the show a few times. It's just like, if Mike's often said, because he is, of course, he's the sports card guy. He
Hmm.
knows more about sports cards than I do. But and people are like, why would you have me? Like, why would you have Jesse as the co-host? Like, why would he be on the show? And it's, to his credit, he's always said, if I wanted to just talk to another guy and hear a similar take as me, I would have like another sports card guy on. But in a way, there's so many people, there's so many more people that aren't sports card people out there, that you want a differing take so that you can ask questions and get thoughts and opinions of someone who would be new to the hobby. And that's kind of where we see the benefit of, seeing both sides, positive, negative, just two sides of really any argument.
No, absolutely. And I will say before we started recording, just a little behind the curtain, we briefly talked about, I jokingly said, or maybe half kidding, that I was
Yeah.
like nervous about this. But no, I was really excited for this. And we're talking about, you know, how when it comes to creating content and talking, which I'm not doing very well right now because I'm trying to recreate that quote you said in my head, where you were saying something about how, like, you may not know as much as other people about sports, but please help me out here, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm trying to even remember it myself. You know what? I'm just going to pull up my Instagram thing and I'm going to see. No, I think it was. I don't always know the most about sports, but I do enjoy talking about the subject. Does that sound
Hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah,
I, yeah. Oh, you know what? Here it is. Um, I think it was. I'm. I'm just reading the one there. I said I'm constantly sweating, so that wasn't it.
that's right.
No,
We're
it
talking about
was
anxiety and sweating and how both of us sweat quite a bit as being bigger dudes. And again, there's no shaming in this podcast. Other than the fact that I think the Florida education system may be a little bit better than the Tennessee education system, but I
that's hard
digress.
to find one that's better than the or worse than the Tennessee education system.
Pay our teachers.
Yeah, I'm trying to
No,
look
I,
at
I
my
think
comments. I don't remember actually what I said now, so
I will
I'm not
succinctly
helping you here, man. I'm
No, it's
sorry.
all good. I will succinctly said my comment to you was there is this imposter syndrome that goes around with me, and I'm not speaking for you, but when it comes
Oh, you're
to
talking about then. I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
I feel wholly unqualified to have this podcast, but I think that's what makes me qualified to have this podcast is that I come at it from a different perspective. And that's what you're saying about with Mike, where you have this different perspective when it comes to the sports cards world. You're like the not a newbie, but like you're coming at it with more, open eyes and not so rigid thinking and the walls up and you have all your talking points and your arguments like it's like first
Yeah.
take or hot take or whatever the take it is. You just come at it with a lot of genuine curiosity, right?
Yeah. And I apologize. You know what? This you asked earlier, like if because you said there's no editing in your podcast. We
Yes.
will edit things. We'll edit things like that. Like we'll go back
Mm.
and be like, oh yeah, wait, what are you talking? And then it's like dead time. It's confusing. It's like what? And then we like, oh, we get back on the same page. It's like Carlos, cut that up until this point. We're gonna take it from there.
Oh,
That's
I have no
typically the
Carlos.
I
I have,
know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Once you get a Carlos, you're gonna love it.
yes, all
But
right.
anyways, yeah. To your point, um, I do often feel that I may not know much about what I'm talking about when it comes to sports. I feel
Mm,
very. That's the only time I really feel nervous
mm,
is talking on the podcast when it's very sport oriented and not hobby related at all. Because at this point, I've learned a lot about the hobby and I've learned a lot about how to manage a business or how to just collect and do all these like little nuanced things in the hobby. But at the end
mhm,
of the day, when it comes to sports cards in the hobby, it's like I know why this guy may be good, but the history of sports still is not something that I am as up to date on. I'm getting more comfortable with current modern day stuff, but like Mike will say, like oh, back in 2005 when this happened, or Brady in 2000 did it, and I'm just like, oh yeah, okay. I'm just like nodding my head, unless it was like Michael Jordan doing something, the odds of me actually knowing the event
mhm,
is very unlikely. And therefore I get a little uncomfortable. I'll be a little bit more quiet during those takes. And
right.
I think people appreciate the fact of like, hey, okay, maybe that's not my strong suit, or that if that's not anybody's strong suit, but allow the person whose strong suit it is to just kind of take over the conversation. It used to be where I'd want to try and jump in and add something, and you'd hear a lot of stuttering, pausing, and it's just like if it's not obvious to anyone else, it's at least obvious to myself. Like, oh, why am I talking about this? Why am I even getting involved? Just let him do his thing, and then maybe ask a few side questions, get a little bit more engagement. But I don't have to be that knowledgeable on it, and that's where we've gotten to with a lot of different takes that he'll have. Like he's been in the hobby for years, and like you said, I've only been there for a few months, or well,
Yeah,
since
yeah,
2021, really.
yeah, yeah.
And he'll say something like the other day he said that sports baseball is the most popular, most collected sports card right now.
Yep.
And I'm just
Mm,
like, I don't, how do you know that? Like, I think he thinks that because it's his favorite. And that's what
right.
the guys that surround him, like the guys, some of his biggest fans are guys who have been following him for a very long time. And they're also big baseball guys. And
Hmm.
so it just makes sense. Like you've got like you're in an echo chamber of guys with the same opinion, and therefore you think like that must be it because everyone else around me is saying the exact same thing, when in fact it's just, you have a segment and that's what they're saying, and so you're basing your thoughts on that. I do tend to think that there's so much that I don't know, and I don't want to make any assumption. And sometimes that even means not listening to the guy who I respect and appreciate his opinion on sports cards almost more than anybody else. So, which again goes back to benefiting the listener because then we can oftentimes hopefully get to the bottom of it. More than half the time, Mike is actually accurate or he's correct in a lot of his statements that he'll make. But then you'll go and you'll have a guest on, and it's like, all right, clear this up. What do you think? And I'm very proud of the times where I've had a dissenting opinion on whatever he said, and then it turned out to be right, and the guest proved that. That always feels really, really good. So it is true to say that, a different opinion can also benefit as far as educating people, because even I've seen it now that we've been doing the podcast. I just watch TV, like watch a talk show of any kind, anything where they're live, and I can see through the curtain a little bit. It's like once you've
Mhm.
been doing this long enough, you can
Mhm.
kind of see behind the veil of like,
Mhm.
oh, that person actually doesn't. They're just super confident with their answer or their thought that you would believe them no matter what they said here. And when in reality, they probably don't know any more detail on a certain subject. You can typically tell when someone gets asked a question and then they try and change the subject matter as quick as possible. It's like, oh, they're the subject matter expert on this topic, but then they don't really talk about it at all. They change it to a similar topic that's not quite the same because they know more about it. I don't know. I digress. I'm ranting at this point, but it is interesting, like when you get into this for a while, to see how not only does it work for yourself, but it's
Mhm.
not just. I don't think we're all that different. I think most humans are like, okay, well, if I can be confident enough in my answer, people won't see that I'm a phony. And to your point about imposter syndrome, that's kind of where it is with sports. Like for me, a lot of times there's sometimes I may know it because I'll try and do research and try and educate myself, especially if I know we're going to talk about it beforehand. But otherwise, it's like a fake it till you make it type of thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is the longest you've been allowed to speak on a podcast without being interrupted
Well,
by
fortunately,
Mike?
I've been on a few like interviews.
Okay, so this is my first time doing an outro, just trying different things out, seeing what works, what doesn't. Same thing with not calling this episode a fireside chat in the title. I won't make this outro long, but I did want to thank you for listening to the first half of my chat with Jesse Gibson. As you just heard, we talked about content creation, why he and Mike like to keep their content clean, which is what I like to do too. And nothing against people who don't, but it's just our style. The conversation about imposter syndrome, I still think about that concept a lot. I imagine those thoughts will creep into my mind during national as well. But I'm really just hoping that I'm just having so much fun to even worry about things like that. So, second half, we get more into TCG nonsense. Thanks again for listening, and I will try to drop part two within a day's time as well. Even with an outro, I don't really have a good outro phrase, but I really like the just saying auf Wiedersehen at the end. So I will say auf Wiedersehen, Germany.